Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for spending some time with me here today. As always, it is a time for you to connect, to share your thoughts, to ask questions from serious to silly. Sometimes I pose questions to focus on. Sometimes we begin and go off on a tangent and see where it goes. So this morning, I want to focus a little bit on grief. Um, Some of you may have seen my feed, my post from yesterday. A friend, colleague, mentor, pastor passed away, Pastor Reverend Dr. Richard Stewart. He was a professor at Philadelphia Seminary, but he was also part of my candidacy process. He helped me through my process directly as I went through my candidacy, and we've remained in contact. He was part of the worshiping community in New York, where I was for a while, because he needed to be rostered up there and be in church. But also, we just celebrated here in the church just a few Sundays ago, All Saints Sunday, where we gave thanks for those who have gone before us, those saints. And that's not always an easy service. We had 17 names that we read, that 17 families that struggled directly. I've had some friends here and some colleagues who have lost friends and loved ones and family members of recent. And and it's something that we often don't talk about, grief. It's something that I don't often talk about, even in the midst of doing the work that I do and being welcomed into homes and care for and in sacred, what I consider sacred spaces. I've had families who I don't know well who have invited me to walk with them as their loved one goes through illness and sickness and death. I have sat by bedsides of family, with families, as they said their last goodbyes and as their loved ones have had their last. And people have often said that must be one of the most difficult parts of your job. And in some ways it is, but I don't think in the way most people think. It's, as I said, it's sacred. It's something that I feel honored to be a part of as people go through this very personal, very emotional, very painful time, and to be able to be there, uh, hopefully to offer comfort. I'm not always sure if there is comfort to offer other than just presence. And I think it's important for us to recognize that grief takes many forms and that people deal with grief in many ways. Yes, there are the stages of grief, but those stages look different with everyone. Um, we don't all grieve the same, so we aren't all angry as one of the stages of grief, or deny it in the same way. So I think there's many ways for this to happen. Also, there is no timeline. It doesn't set up that, well, this happens, so you'll feel this way for a week and feel this way for 2 weeks and feel this way for 6 months. Um, that doesn't happen. It's not a correlated step process for people, because people grieve differently. We all grieve differently. We all struggle with that. So part of that becomes being able to recognize our own grief, and being able to live into it. I'll say, I don't want to say work through it, because it's not something we work through. It's something I believe we live into. It's something that we experience, and it's in varying degrees depending on the closeness of the person, the deepness of the relationship, um, And it goes beyond the death of a person. And I think when we think of grief, we often think of, well, at the loss of life, but we grieve many things. I've seen many people over the course of the last 6 months who've lost pets, who've lost family, members of their family who are furry. And we grieve those losses. We grieve the losses of jobs. We grieve the losses of homes, of things that aren't the same. So we experience loss in different ways, and with that we then experience that grief differently. So someone who may have lost their job might experience grief the same as someone who's lost a close loved one. um, and and so it's finding the opportunities to sit with that person, to be present with that person. um, I'll, I'll never forget uh, one of the things that we're required to do in seminary is to do what's called CPE, which is clinical pastoral education. And so you have to be in a hospital or a nursing home um, for usually it's 3 months. Usually it when I did it, I'll speak for me. When I did it, it was a summer program, so you did it in between semesters, and you were required to be there. And there were requirements where you were to be on call overnight. So you stayed in the hospital. If there was an emergency in the ER, you responded to it. If there was any emergency, you responded to it. You were paged, and you were called in. So I got called one night early in the morning, probably about 3 o'clock in the morning. I got called. Didn't really know much, except I got called to a room, went there. Um, the patient had passed away. The doctor led the family into the room, said, "I'm sorry, we did everything we could," and then proceeded to leave. Um, I spent 6 hours with that family. And probably most of it, for me, was done in silence. For the first hour and a half, they didn't even know I was there. And then for the next bit of time, they wondered who I was because no one had introduced me, no one had said anything about me. And I just was there in the background. And finally, I introduced myself. I said I would be there if they needed anything, and I would just be there until they were ready. And I stood there. Those are powerful moments. Those are sacred moments. Um, I don't know whatever happened. Um, I know there was a service at some point, but it's those moments. I've been with people who've lost jobs, who've struggled with an addicted family member, and the loss of relationship. And I think it's how do we walk together, realizing that almost everyone has gone through some form of loss and grieves in some way, and some of those wounds are still very raw and we don't see them. And some people think may have been healed, but when it comes to it, really haven't been. And something that they thought or you thought would be not a big deal turns out to be a huge deal because of they're still grieving. And so I just wonder, as we go through this week ahead, what does your grief look like? How do you live into that grief? How has that grief changed you? If you are brave enough and want to share, I invite you to please do so. Um, I still am working through grief. I lost my mother a little over a year ago, um, and it's still there's still a lot there. Um, lost friends and colleagues. Um, I have a good friend of mine who's uh, basically a brother in every sense of the word, who has lost his mother, his brother, um, and I have been thankful enough to be able to walk with him and hold him up, which is not an easy thing to do because he's a lot bigger than I am. But walking into that, living into that, finding ways forward, engaging in those opportunities, and recognizing that we don't know the whole story. We don't know people's full stories, and we don't know what they're going through at the moment we encounter them. How they're acting could just be because they're having a really bad day struggling with their grief. And so, how then do we show compassion? How do we live graciously when people are living through pain and struggle that we may have no idea, or we may be unsure of how to even figure, what do we do? How do we live through it? What does it look like? And we may not have anything. Paul says those wounds never heal. We just set the grief aside. Other grief, I think people can get past, but never a loss of a loved one, just my opinion. I think I can see where you are coming from, Paul. And I think, um, yeah, maybe they don't heal. Maybe they heal but scar, or maybe they are those type that they heal at least externally, but it's wounds that we carry with us. Um, I wonder if, for some of you, that you may know the story of Lazarus, where Lazarus was a friend of Jesus. He was sick. His sisters sent word to Jesus that he was dying and asked him to come. Jesus waits, shows up after Lazarus has died. And I wonder if part of that was because Jesus needed to experience death. He needed to understand the grief and loss that people go through, that we all go through. Um, and the realization of what can take place and how that can change us and impact us, but also how we can grow differently into that, and find new ways forward. And I think it's an opportunity for us to see each other differently, um, to see each other in ways to live more fully, and to respect one another. Gail says today would have been my brother's birthday, and he's been gone 8 years this December. I still grieve him at times, but sometimes I cry. And other times I laugh about memories. And I think it's those opportunities, those joyful moments, and those grief filled moments that allow us as community, as individuals, as community, to come together, to recognize that, to to be more engaged with one another and to walk beside one another in both those times of grief and those times of laughter. Um, I find often when I am invited to do services for people uh, that even at funerals there is laughter because there are those memories, are those joyous moments that people remember and hold firm to. Um, and that doesn't diminish the grief, but it actually, I think, helps us work through, again, I don't like it, live into that a little bit differently. So thank you all for sharing. Paul and Gail, thank you guys so much for spending some time with me, and for everyone else who is watching and sharing in this time. If this was helpful for you, I invite you to share it. If you guys have more questions or comments, please share it. If you are watching this later on and have questions, you can always feel free to reach out as an opportunity for us to connect and for ways to reach out. But know that whatever grief you are going through, wherever you are, if you are of someone who sees this not on my page but from someone else, you're not alone. And we are always here to support and care for you no matter what, no matter where you are, no matter how far away you are. I hope you all have a blessed day as we go through this together. Take care, everybody. God bless. I'll see you again soon.